Hi everybody, I am Elise. This is another Truth on YouTube. Thank you so much for stopping by my channel. I do appreciate the time that you have taken to listen to my audio-only commentary. My thumbnail and background picture here might be a little bit more dramatic than how I might talk about this, but I think it's important to bring this up, and I think for me it's also important to express my opinions about this particular podcast. Now I'm referring to the second podcast entitled The Shocking Vanity Fair article, and that is from the Just Trisha podcast. I really like that Trisha is going solo on this and that she has a clear vision on this podcast. And I think that the more she does that, I think the better it will be for her. I think this will be a very successful podcast. And I think that she has brought on board an excellent entertainment journalist by the name of Oscar Gracey. And the pair works so well together. The chemistry is wonderful. I know that they are connected, but he is also, uber professional and really has great insight in things going on, things that are written. And I think with Trisha's experience, sort of, being in the media and being influential in that way, in whatever way, as she is, it really makes for a good connection. So I think she really, I know she mentioned that she has a number of failed starts in the podcast world, but I think, she might bring up entertainment stuff, but I can see the sophistication come through. I see the seriousness of things coming through. And this is the Trisha Paytas that I want to see. This is good for her growth, for her self-confidence, and I think it'll be a success. But this particular episode, specifically around the Vanity Failure article, was very compelling, and I think they gave a lot of insights about it. I know Trisha mentioned in the podcast that she had not read the Vanity Failure article. If I were her, I wouldn't read it. It's very difficult to get through, and it really blames the victims in this. Now, Trisha is a victim in this whole Colleen thing. No matter what you think of Trisha, even if she didn't come out sooner with things, there are a lot of troubling things around this, but I think that experiencing sex-based harassment by way of revenge porn is a very serious matter, and I think sex workers are still vilified in society, and their health and protection against this kind of emotional violence that could lead to worse things. It's not always taken seriously. Now she has a little bit more clout and power. There are a lot of people in sex work who are less powerful, or they had more powerlessness. And I think what Colleen had done to Trisha supports the notion that sex workers should be abused and exploited. And Trisha's boundaries were crossed. And I can imagine how mortified she must have been knowing that her material was being shown to minors. what that makes her look like in her own business, but also it puts her in the jeopardy of experiencing other problems. And that's not something that is always talked about, but that is something I believe that Trisha has talked about lightly in this Vanity Fair, in this particular podcast. I think I wouldn't say lightly, but she made some sort of emphasis on this. She could have probably made more emphasis on it because there are a lot of people in sex work who need kind of like that support from more mainstream sex workers, maybe as a time of solidarity and helping to put things together so that they're safeguarded against things like this. So, I think she really handled that part in the podcast well, though it must have been very triggering for her. And another thing, she does have a lot of empathy for Adam McIntyre's situation in this, at least with respect to Colleen's grooming of him and showing him Trisha Paytas' restricted content. And I think as somebody in the field who has an understanding the impact that this could have on minors, I can understand why Trisha would be mortified by it. And I think she was mortified by it. I think it affected her. Of course it's going to affect her. Any kind of abuse is going to affect her. But I think, having a child herself, understanding her own experiences with, I believe, being groomed, and her own trauma and stuff, I think she understands fully the kind of impact that this has had on Adam. And for her to come out and not really defend him, but to support him in a way, even though that they don't have any kind of relationship other than this one trauma bond, I think she handled it well, given how critical he was of her, and even down, saying terrible things about her unborn baby, which, is something you don't do. The children are off limits. Like, you don't insult people's children. I mean, come on. That's despicable. And I think Adam has learned from that experience not to do that again, because saying things like that about children, if children ever got wind of that, it could affect them. And I think he understands that. And I think she understands it. He understands that. But there is no relationship between those two other than this Colleen effect that that has affected them in a certain way. So I really think that the podcast kind of puts that into perspective, and she does clarify some things around that. And I think Oscar also did a really good job of interpreting the Vanity Fair article. And from his journalistic point of view, it was a hit piece. It was a piece maybe to defend Colleen. It was a PR move, perhaps. I think it was an opinion hit piece against the victims more than it really was to support Colleen, although that was the point of it. But Oscar also pointed out how they kind of downplayed and try to break apart Rolling Stone. The Rolling Stone article. The Rolling Stone article was far more, I would say, technical, fact-based. They brought on professionals. I think they try to reach out to Colleen. She didn't respond and stuff like that. Whereas Andrew Katana, who wrote this Vanity Fair article, didn't do any sort of a thing. Didn't want to hear from any of the victims. Had completely blocked them out of his mind when he wrote that article. I mean, that was specifically. And I think Oscar pointed out, because sometimes these types of celebrities have relationships with writers and things like that, that this kind of thing happens. Too many people want to ride the coattails of celebrities. They want to be in their aura of fame and power, that they'll sell themselves out to do that. And perhaps that is what Andrew Katana did in his article, which is sad, because he could have done so well for himself by being on the right side of things and having the respect of humanity in general. To me, that is far more important than chasing some famous reprobate who doesn't give a shit about children. So, really good perspectives. And I think, personally, Trisha is better off doing this podcast alone. She doesn't have to work with this reprobate, Colleen Ballinger, and doing these snarky, stupid things that keeps putting Trisha back in a place of depravity, self-deprecation, and being the butt of Colleen's jokes. I mean, that's the only reason why Colleen would have done that. Colleen wanted to feel superior to Trisha. She used Trisha's sexuality as a way to hypersexualize Trisha and make her out to be kind of a villain, a witch of some sort. And I think witches are cool. And I think witches have gotten a bad reputation, a bad name, but this was Colleen's idea of a witch hunt. And in her circle, there are, she believes witches are bad, that they're evil, they cast spells, whatever. I don't know. Which is really amazing, because Colleen doesn't look at her own hypersexuality and her sexual impropriety. Doesn't examine that. She hides it behind her family channel. She hides it behind her family. And if I were to, I don't want to compare these two women, but Trisha's far more honest about who and what she is than Colleen could ever be. So yeah, Trisha's better off being alone, for that matter. And Trisha's grown. And hopefully Trisha will come to take account for other things that she's done for her healing process, and to make amends, and, to others, but to herself. But I think she's on the right way of that. I think at least that's what her production certainly indicates in her podcast. I think she is being real about that growth, about that understanding. And I think she's taken the time at least to educate the public about certain things and to dispel certain myths about sex work. And I think that's important in this conversation. Adam McIntyre gave his reaction to the podcast and to the Vanity Fair article, and he has mentioned, a pleasant exchange with Trisha Paytas, and also confirms that there is no other connection that he has with him other than this one trauma bond, I suppose, and that that's a situation mutually agreed upon between the two of them. So, I mean, I hope they both can find some healing from this and that they're both getting the help that they need to work through it, because being in this situation, being groomed and exposed to things as a child, and for Trisha being sex-based harassed by way of revenge porn, it's horrific. It's horrific, and these are things that can affect them through their lives. And I hope that they will find their way to the path of healing. Okay, well, that's pretty much my opinion of this. I will link Trisha's podcast in the description box. If you, in her description of the podcast, you will hear the Colleen Ballinger slash Vanity Failure article perspective. Listen to that because it's really interesting. All right, nothing too dramatic here, nothing sensationalized. These are just my opinions. I hope that you're all doing well and you're taking care of yourselves. And come back at another time if you'd like. Bye-bye.